Hello and welcome, I am His Most Awesomest Night Train, and I want to teach you the very basics of StarCraft II in exactly 15 minutes. Whether you are a girlfriend, spouse, coworker, or sentient alien race, I am here to help you gain an understanding of this worldwide phenomenon. Like any new sport, things will likely seem fairly confusing if you're entirely unfamiliar. However, with time and a hearty dose of this video, even someone who has never played the game before can watch and enjoy professional StarCraft. Part 1, the very basics. At its heart, StarCraft is a game of three things: economy management, army management, and strategy. A typical StarCraft II map is a battlefield of tiered heights filled with cliffs, choke points, ramps, and resources. Each map has a certain number of starting locations, usually set in the corners of the map, where each player begins their game. Each player is randomly assigned this starting position, and maps used in competitive play are functionally symmetrical, meaning the geography, layout, and resources are identical regardless of starting position. On any given map, one will find two different types of resources: minerals and Vespene gas. Minerals are shiny, blue, and very common, while Vespene gas is green, much rarer, and unlike minerals, requires special equipment to harvest. Mineral fields and Vespene geysers are found in certain patterns across the map, and it is centered around these fields that players construct bases and spend resources to build buildings, train units, and research technologies. Every unit, building, or technology in the game has a mineral and Vespene cost, as well as a construction time, with more costly purchases generally being more powerful. In order to build a Thor, for example, a player needs 300 minerals and 200 Vespene gas, and once purchased, the Thor will take 60 seconds to build. Resources are generally spent in one of three ways: improving resource intake, creating military units, or researching more powerful technologies. As economies grow, players expand to new resource centers to increase their intake, and as each mineral field and Vespene geyser's resource amount is finite. Generally, players want to be spending and investing their income as quickly as they acquire it, as there is no direct benefit to hoarding or banking resources until one has nothing left to spend it on. Units in StarCraft are the moving, fighting forces that allow one to destroy and defeat an opponent. The amount of damage dealt, the speed at which a unit attacks and moves, how much damage a unit can take before it is killed, and any special abilities that it may have varies between different types of units. Units in StarCraft II can be divided as such: workers/harvesters, ground versus air units, melee versus ranged units, and spellcasting and invisible units. Workers or harvesters collect and return resources and construct buildings that allow the training of units and the research of technologies. Harvesters are not made for fighting and deal little damage while dying quickly while under attack. Especially in the early stages of a game, harvesters are extremely valuable. Ground units make up the majority of StarCraft II units and are restricted to land. This means they must move around obstacles and have a disadvantage when climbing ramps, as opposed to flying units which are uninhibited in any way by terrain. Melee units are units which can only deal damage through hand-to-hand combat, while ranged units can fire at a distance, as well as over cliffs and obstacles. Ranged units have different distances from which it can attack. Spellcasting units have a special energy bar that allows them to use powerful abilities, each requiring a certain amount of energy to use. Energy recharges at a fixed rate, and in general, spellcasting units do not attack like normal units. Invisible units cannot be attacked unless seen by a unit with a special detection ability. You can see in this demonstration that a Marine deals 6 damage with each attack, fires every 0.86 seconds, and has 45 hit points, whereas this Zergling deals 5 damage, attacks every 0.7 seconds, and has 35 hit points. Certain units are especially powerful against other units. For example, when placed near a choke point, a group of Marines can quickly kill a group of Zerglings before the Zerglings can close the distance to attack. However, when surrounded, a group of Marines quickly die to the swarm of Zerglings. As StarCraft is a strategy game, decision-making skills are paramount to success. Decisions like when to begin harvesting from a new resource location, the makeup or composition of one's army, the time to attack an opponent, and the way one manages his or her army in battle can all determine the outcome of a game. In addition to mineral costs, Vespene costs, and construction times, all units take up supply as well. Weaker units like Marines take only 1 supply, where larger, more powerful units like Ultralisks take up to 6. Supply effectively limits how many units a player can have in the battlefield at one time, and buildings can be constructed to raise the supply limit, maxing out at 200. A unit takes up supply only when it is alive, and once it dies, the supply it occupied dies with it. Most units are affected by some kind of upgrade researched at specialized buildings. Upgrades need only be researched once per game and apply to all applicable units instantly, both presently and in the future. For example, Zerglings have an upgrade called Metabolic Boost that, when researched, drastically increases their movement speed. All units can have their damage and armor upgraded, and most units have at least one upgrade specific to them. Part 2, Races. StarCraft II consists of 3 diverse yet fairly similar playable factions or races. The only slightly redneck Terran, the psionic and otherwise BA Protoss, and the swarming, mutating Zerg. Each race consists of about 12 to 15 different units and roughly as many buildings. For the sake of simplicity, I'll be covering the most common, as well as giving a brief demonstration. A full printable reference guide to all the units in StarCraft II can be found in this description. If you're completely new to the game, this will undoubtedly be a lot of information to take in. However, the units are designed to be fairly easily distinguishable from one another, and with the handy-dandy reference guide, you'll quickly pick it all up. Terran. Terran are a race focused on defensive tactics and careful positioning. Terran workers are called SCVs, and the main Terran base is called a command center. Command centers can be upgraded into either an orbital command, which can call down super harvesting mules and scan for invisible enemies, or a planetary fortress, a powerful immobile cannon. Once an upgrade has been completed, it cannot be restored, and in general, players will always choose to make orbital commands unless they feel a particular location is especially vulnerable. Terran supply is increased through supply depots, which can be raised or lowered into the ground to seal off ground access. Terran units are trained by 3 different structures: a barracks, which trains ground infantry units, a factory, which trains powerful mechanical units, and a starport, which, unsurprisingly, creates flying starships. The 2 main units trained by the barracks are Marines, all-around powerful but individually weak infantry fighters, and Marauders, heavily armored anti-ground infantry fighters. Marines can attack both ground and air units. Marauder attacks can be upgraded to slow enemy movement speed, and both units have access to the Stim Pack upgrade, which allows them to sacrifice health for a temporary movement and attack speed bonus. The 2 main units trained by the factory are Hellions, mobile harassment units that deal damage in a straight line, and siege tanks, slow-moving tanks that can trade the ability to move for drastically increased range and firepower. Hellions and siege tanks cannot attack air units. Marines, combined with siege tanks, are often the bread and butter of a Terran army. The 2 main units trained by the starport are Medivacs, flying, non-attacking dropships that can transport units and heal them in battle, and Vikings, which are powerful anti-aircraft fighters that can transform to ground walkers. While in air mode, Vikings can only attack air units, and while on the ground, they can only attack ground units. Barracks, factories, and starports can all also be attached to a single add-on, either a tech lab or a reactor. Attaching a building to a tech lab allows the construction of certain units and certain upgrades, while attaching a reactor allows the training of 2 units at a time. We can see that when a factory is attached to a tech lab, it can train siege tanks and research upgrades, but when it is attached to a reactor, it cannot train siege tanks but can train 2 Hellions at once. Finally, barracks, factories, starports, command centers, and orbital commands can all be lifted into the air and moved, albeit very slowly. This allows the buildings to escape danger as well as relocate or switch add-ons. When flying, buildings cannot train units or receive resources until they land. Protoss. Protoss are a race focused on high-tech units and powerful armies. Protoss workers are called probes, and the main Protoss base is called a Nexus. The Nexus can use an ability called Chrono Boost, which speeds up production and research of a building for a short period of time. Unlike Terran buildings, which require an SCV's full attention to construct, Protoss buildings are constructed on their own once placed and paid for. Protoss supply is increased through pylons, which also provide a static power field that allows the construction of buildings. Buildings can only be built in power fields, and destroying all power fields near a building will cause it to stop functioning until repowered. The Nexus is the only Protoss building that does not require a power field to function. Protoss units are trained through gateways, robotics facilities, and stargates. Much like barracks, gateways are the primary training ground for Protoss units. The main 3 units trained by gateways are Zealots, powerful melee attackers, Stalkers, all-around ranged fighters, and Sentries, force field-wielding support units. Stalkers can be upgraded with the Blink ability, which allows them to teleport short distances every few seconds. Once the warp gate technology has been researched, gateways can transform into warp gates, allowing each gate to near instantly train units into any power field anywhere on the map. Once a unit has been trained, the warp gate must cool down for a short period of time before it can train another unit. Constructing additional buildings can allow warp gates to train in Dark Templar, permanently invisible assassins, and High Templar, powerful spellcasters. 2 of any Templar can be morphed together into an Archon, a powerful anti-infantry fighter. Robotics facilities and stargates work much more like their Terran counterparts and cannot be converted into warp gates. Robotics facilities can train immortals, high damage range units that can only attack ground units, and have specialized shields that drastically reduce the damage of powerful attacks. Colossus are lumbering anti-infantry giants that can climb cliffs, attack with super sweet laser beams, and can be attacked as though it were a ground or a flying unit. Finally, the 2 main units out of the Stargate are Phoenixes, fast anti-air skirmishers that can pick up ground units into the air and suspend them, and Void Rays, powerful but vulnerable attack ships that attack using a beam that increases in damage the longer it is fixed on a single target. Unlike Terran or Zerg units, all Protoss units and buildings have shields, which act as a second health bar and regenerate over time. For example, a Stalker has 80 shield points and 100 hit points, meaning that it effectively takes 180 damage to kill a Stalker. Units with shields take no health damage until their shields have been drained, and do not die until their actual health has hit 0. Zerg. Zerg are a race focused on mobility, dispensable units, and powerful economies. Zerg workers are called drones, and the main Zerg base is called a hatchery. Instead of building or summoning buildings, drones directly morph into Zerg buildings, meaning a drone is lost every time a building is created. Zerg functions quite differently than Terran or Protoss because all Zerg units are trained through larvae, generated over time by hatcheries. Instead of training units directly from certain buildings, the Zerg requires certain buildings to unlock different units, and then can train those units directly from larvae. The exception to this rule are birth queens, which defend Zerg bases and spend energy to inject hatcheries with Zerg eggs, which hatch into larvae over a short period of time. In order to maximize production, Zerg players almost always have a queen dedicated to injecting larvae into each hatchery that they make. Queens can also lay creep tumors into the ground, which spread the purple ooze that surrounds Zerg territory. Hatcheries and creep tumors generate creep over a small area, and Zerg buildings must be built on creep and slowly wither and die if they are left off of it. Zerg units gain a notable movement speed boost while on creep. Creep tumors are invisible, and when destroyed, the creep they generated slowly recedes. Zerg supply is increased not through buildings, but through overlords, slow flying units that are effective at scouting but vulnerable to attack. When a Zerg unit is trained, the larva morphs into a Zerg cocoon, which protects the larva until it hatches into the unit of choice. A spawning pool allows for the creation of Zerglings. Zerglings are the token Zerg unit, weak individually but powerful in large numbers. Zerglings are inexpensive and expendable and can be upgraded to allow for faster movement speed. Once a Baneling nest has been created, Zerglings can be directly morphed into Banelings in the field, slow but very powerful moving landmines that explode on impact. A Roach Warren allows for the creation of Roaches. Roaches are all-around ranged Zerg fighters with decent damage and high defense. Roaches can be upgraded to move while underground, allowing them to move unseen under obstacles and regenerate health quickly. A Spire allows for the creation of flying Zerg units. The most notable is the Mutalisk, a fast raiding unit that has an attack that bounces between multiple targets at once. Mutalisks are very weak in small groups, but their bouncing attack and agility makes them a force to be reckoned with in large numbers. Finally, an infestation pit allows for the creation of infestors. Infestors do not attack like normal units, but rely on spellcasting to deal damage. Infestors can cast an ability called Fungal Growth, which deals a large amount of damage to units in a small area and roots them to the ground for a few seconds, allowing other Zerg units to surround or flank them. Infestors can also rapidly lay infested Terran eggs, which hatch into slow-moving Zerg-controlled marines. Much like command centers, Zerg hatcheries can be upgraded to allow access to new units and technologies. Hatcheries can be upgraded into layers, which then can be upgraded into hives. Since upgrading gives no other benefits besides new units and technology access, Zerg players generally only designate one hatchery for upgrade. All Zerg ground units can learn the Burrow ability, which allows them to dig into the ground, becoming invisible, and they can only be attacked when detected. On top of this, Zerg units naturally regenerate lost health points, though very slowly. That is a general outline of the 3 races in StarCraft II, and more information on these and other units I did not mention can be found in the reference guide and through watching games. At this point you should have a fairly general idea of how StarCraft II works and should be able to follow a game, though having a friend to help explain is certainly helpful. In part 2 of my super awesome guide, I'll be explaining some of the more advanced concepts in StarCraft II, like the general overarching strategies used by high-level players, as well as some of the nerdy terminology one will hear in a high-level game.